Oh, that's wonderful. That's great news. With the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide approaching, what is being planned and what are your thoughts about a resolution?
Well, I think there are innumerable efforts going on both here in our community, around the United States, and around the world to press for the strongest acknowledgement of the Armenian Genocide possible by our President, by our Congress, by other governments around the world. And I don't think we ought to let a day go by without working on making that happen. I hope that this exhibition will be one step along the path towards recognition. It's certainly no substitute in any way, shape, or form for a direct recognition of the genocide. There are, I think, going to be marches, there are going to be cross-country trips, there are going to be all kinds of efforts to apply pressure to our government to do the right thing. And I'm going to be contributing that in every way. One concern I have, given the situation in Syria and Iraq with ISIS and our government's strong desire to get Turkey on board. Turkey has not become a full-fledged member of the coalition to combat ISIS. I'm concerned that some may use this as just the most recent excuse not to recognize the genocide. We have heard this every year that I've been in Congress, that this year is just not the right year because the war in Iraq, because of Afghanistan, because of the efforts at reconciliation or the TARP process. Every year it's something else, and I'm concerned that some are going to say, well, okay, this is not the year. This is the 100th year. This is the centennial year. If not now, when? And from my own point of view, every year has been the right year to recognize the genocide, and no year is the right year to become complicit in Turkey's campaign of denial.
An open letter to the Turkish people. Today I write to you on an issue of great importance to both our nations. It is on a subject that many of you, especially the younger generation, may know little about, because it concerns a chapter of world history that your government has expended enormous efforts to conceal. Turkey has been at the center of human civilization from Neolithic times to the present, and your arts, culture, and science have enriched the world. But interwoven with all of Turkey's remarkable achievements is a dark chapter that too many of today's Turks know little or nothing about. Were you aware that your grandparents and great-grandparents had many Armenian neighbors and friends? That 20% of the population of today's Istanbul was Armenian? Did you know the Armenians were well integrated into Turkish society as celebrated intellects, artists, craftsmen, and community leaders? Have you ever wondered what happened to the Armenians? Have you ever asked your parents and grandparents how such a large, industrious, and prosperous people largely vanished from your midst? Do you know why your government goes to such lengths to conceal this part of your history? Let me tell you a part of their story. The rest you must find out for yourselves. 99 years ago this month, in the dying years of the Ottoman Empire, the young Turk government launched a campaign of deportation, expropriation, starvation, and murder against the empire's Armenian citizens. Much of the Armenian population was forcibly removed to Syria, where many succumbed during brutal, forced marches through the desert heat. Hundreds of thousands were massacred by Ottoman gendarmes, soldiers, and even their own neighbors. By the time the slaughter ended in 1923, 1.5 million Armenians had been killed in what is now universally acknowledged as the first genocide of the 20th century. The survivors scattered throughout the Middle East and the wider world, with some making their way to the United States and to Los Angeles. It is their grandchildren and great-grandchildren who I represent as a member of U.S. Congress. Theirs is a vibrant community, many tens of thousands strong, with schools, churches, and businesses providing a daily link to their ancestral homeland. And it is on their behalf that I urge you to begin anew a national conversation in Turkey about the events of 1915 to 1923. As a young man or woman in Turkey, you might ask, what has this to do with me? Am I to blame for a crime committed long before I was born? And I would say this: yours is the moral responsibility to acknowledge the truth and seek a reconciliation with the Armenian people that your parents and their parents could or would not. It is an obligation you have inherited, and one from which you must not shrink. For though we cannot choose our own history, we decide what to do about it, and you will be the ones to shape Turkey's future. At the end of World War II, Germany was a shattered nation, defeated in battle and exposed as history's greatest war criminal. But in the decades since the end of the war, Germany engaged in a prolonged effort to reconcile with the Jewish people who were nearly exterminated by the Nazis during the Holocaust. The German government has prosecuted war criminals, returned expropriated property, allied itself with Israel, and made countless apologies to the victims and to most important, Germany has worked to expunge the cancer of dehumanizing bigotry and hatred that gave rise to the Holocaust. This path of reflection, reconciliation, and repentance must be Turkey's path as well. It will not be easy. The questions will be painful, the answers difficult, sometimes unknowable. One question stands out. How could a nation that ruled peaceably over a diverse multicultural empire for centuries have turned on one of its own peoples with such ruthlessness that an entirely new word had to be invented to describe what took place? Genocide. As in Judaism and Christianity, the concept of repentance, or tawbah, is central to Islam. Next year will mark a century since the beginning of the genocide, and Armenians around the world will mourn their dead, contemplate the enormity of their loss, and ask why. Answer them, please, with words of repentance. Sincerely, Adam Schiff, Member of Congress. I yield back.
There is a pending resolution in the House on the Armenian churches in Turkey. What is the status of that resolution now, and when do you think it will pass in the full House?
We've had broad support, bipartisan support for the church's resolution in the House, I think in the Senate. At times we got it through one House and not the other. The key is obviously to get through both houses. Okay. And I hope we can succeed before the clock runs out. After the midterm elections, we go back in for what's called a lame duck session. And this would be one of the things that it would be wonderful to try to accomplish during that lame duck. A lot may depend on what happens in the Senate, how long that lame duck session is and how many issues the leadership is willing to take up. There's a speculation that if the House flips, if the Senate flips and becomes Republican, that there'll be a desire just to close down the government and wait until next year. I obviously hope that doesn't happen as a Democrat, but I also hope that doesn't happen in terms of our ability to move forward on important matters like the church's resolution.
Well, there is also another very important thing that I would like to ask you. What is the U.S. doing to combat the Ebola epidemic in West Africa, and what should the U.S. be doing to protect Americans here in the U.S.?
Well, this is a very important question, and I know it's on the minds of a lot of your viewers and others all around the country. We're doing a lot. First and foremost, we're trying to protect people here at home by putting in place a very strict regimen for when people come from that part of the world, that they get checked, that they have to report in, that they only come through certain airports, so we know who they are. Now, some have advocated that we go beyond that and impose a travel ban. The problem with that is we don't have direct flights from those West African countries. They go through Europe, and it'd be very difficult for us to be banning whole flights from Europe. Now, the other problem is that let's say we tried to put a ban on visas. Well, then people are going to try to come surreptitiously. Right now, when people come from that region, which is worse, because then they don't get screened. We don't know if they have a fever. If they get sick later, we don't find out about it until they've had contact with other people. So much as I think many would like to hermetically seal us off, that probably isn't going to work. And in fact, healthcare experts say that would be counterproductive because we need healthcare practitioners to go to West Africa to try to help beat this thing, to isolate it, because the best way to keep our country safe, as well as the right thing to do, is to try to contain this epidemic in those three countries and put an end to it there. And I think on that score, Americans should be very proud. There's no country doing more. We have thousands of troops that are going over there to help build the kind of capacity to deal with this health crisis, and that's something we should be very proud of.
California is also experiencing its worst drought in our lifetimes. What should the state and federal government be doing to combat this also?
It is devastating, and I think we need to adopt really an all-the-above approach, and we'll have an opportunity to take one piece of that. On Election Day, there's a ballot measure that will help us with some of the water infrastructure we need in the state. We're going to need more storage of water. The best way to store it is underground and recharging the aquifers, but we may need above ground storage as well. We're going to need to continue conserving and do a better job with that. We're going to need to do a much better job with reclamation of water. We're going to probably need, akin to this bond measure, better ways to convey water, to get it from waters where water's more plentiful to where it's more necessary. We're also going to have to look at some, for lack of a better description, sacred cows. We artificially lower the price of water, particularly in part of the agricultural expanse of our state, and that may incentivize the growth of certain crops that are not very water smart in a state that is essentially a desert or largely a desert. Much as on the national level we have had to take on some of the farm price supports that have helped a lot of the major agribusinesses but don't do so much for the small farms. We may have to look also at a water policy in terms of whether we're artificially keeping the price of water so low for agricultural purposes that we're creating a scarcity everywhere else.
That's very true. On behalf of the Armenian community, on November 4th, I know that you will be our congressman for the 28th district. We wish you all the best of luck. Thank you so much for all your efforts, all your hard work that you have done for the Armenian community, and it is truly an honor for us to have you as our congressman.
Well, thank you. It's very kind. I want to tell you what an honor it is for me to represent the Armenian community, which has welcomed me from the very first, and I couldn't be more proud to represent such a accomplished and wonderful community as the Armenian community. And I want to also just extend a thank you to people. It's really a treat for me when I'm out in the community for people to stop me and tell me they appreciate what I'm doing. Sometimes people will say, I hate to bother you. Let me just tell you, it's never a bother. So if your viewers see me in a restaurant, on the street, in the supermarket, please come by and say hello.
Well, you truly deserve it. You're one of a kind, and like I said, we do wish you the best. And we're very honored to have you as our congressman and representing our Armenian community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching Lights on LA. I truly appreciate it. And I would like to also mention that I would like to thank Mary Hovagimian, who is the field director for Congressman Adam Schiff. Thank you to her for setting up this wonderful meeting and for us to be able to understand our issues and to get a better understanding. Thank you so much for watching Lights on LA. Have a very good evening. Good night.